The Chiefs look to push their record to 8-1 as they travel to Cleveland to face a team in turmoil. I have their game plan coming at you right here. Welcome back. There's a whole lot going on, and this just happens to be the week that everything kind of exploded in Cleveland. We're going to talk about that. We're going to go over each of the 4 points, a couple on offense, a couple on defense, coming at you in a little bit. But first, just want to start with a whole lot of turmoil that's gone on in Cleveland, and that is the coaching staff change. It was kind of doomed from the start, in my opinion, when you saw in Hard Knocks just how lack of respect and control that Hugh Jackson had over that staff in particular. And Todd Haley's a guy not to mince around. I think that was a power struggle from the beginning, with Todd thinking that he was probably going to get a chance to be a head coach there again. Second stint as a head coach, a guy who's going to fight for it, and he kind of went off the rails. And the only thing that surprised me about what happened is that they let them both go. And what that leaves you is Greg Williams in charge of this team. The Greg Williams of infamy, with a bounty program he was running when he was defensive coordinator, a guy that was suspended from the league and through time and attrition was reinstated because the coaching carousel really just goes round and round. Personally, I think it's a detriment to the league to have him as a leader of a team, but that's the way that they have allowed it to fall out. What it means for the Chiefs is they have to be aware. They're going to face a team that is going to come into this contest with more edge than they had before. The defense is probably the stronger point of this team just in general on a talent level, but they certainly played with more edge, with more aggression, because Greg Williams is an aggressive guy. And teams have a tendency to take on the personalities of their coaches. And at this point, I think you expect a little more aggression out of the offense, a lot more aggression actually out of the defense. And it's going to be interesting to see if he's learned from his mistakes, or if there's going to be a lot of pressure out there looking to get chippy, looking to take cheap shots, an over-aggressiveness that has marked some of his defenses in the past. So that said, that's the big caveat for this game. It's not the Cleveland Browns that we've seen so far this season, although there will be aspects. This really is an interesting week to be taking them on, because it's going to be, I think, a fairly dramatic change. But that's where we're at. If you're an old hand around here, thank you for coming back. And if you're new, this is what I do. Chiefs, AFC West, NFL. And if you like what you're seeing, give me that thumbs up, click the subscription and the notifications, and leave your comments so you can jump in the fray around here. Have a lot to come up, so why don't we get to it? Point number 1, Pat Mahomes can continue his role in a push for an MVP season, which, after looking at the film last week, I think you identified that he's gotten to the point where he's moved ahead of Alex Smith. Although, give Alex credit, he's doing a great job in Washington. I think Washington is on the way up still. So both teams have really benefited from this trade, but Patrick Mahomes has come through for pretty much everything we've ever thought he would be. At this point, he has directly mirrored Alex Smith's 2017 in touchdowns and just one more interception at the halfway point of this season. So if we look to continue that, I think ratio to ratio, it looks like it's going to be a good outcome for the Chiefs as well. Maybe even enough to get him an MVP, at least a run at it. So we'll see that as it comes down. Now, what he's going to face in Cleveland is a team that can play some mixed coverages. A lot of times as I look through the film, I see a lot of cover 1 and a lot of cover 2. I don't know if Williams is going to change the plan, knowing that he's facing Mahomes and Watkins and Hill and Kelsey. You might see some more like cover 4 type looks with a lot more bail technique on the corners, but that remains to be seen. At this point, the guy that they have to pay attention to, the Chiefs, looking at the Cleveland defense, is really 2 guys. One is kind of a known entity, superstar at this point, in Myles Garrett. He's going to be facing off against Eric Fisher all day long. He is one of the leading pass rushers in this league, right up there with Dee Ford. Not as many total pressures, but just as many sacks. So he's not probably getting as much consistent pressure on quarterbacks, but when he does, he's getting home. So this is going to be a challenge for Eric Fisher, who has not performed as well as Schwartz to this point in the season, and it's going to be a primetime matchup. And the thing is that that's not the only one. You have this other guy in the back of the defense that's really made a name for himself, a young guy named Denzel Ward, very high draft pick, has really lived up to his proclamation so far this season as well. And when I look at him on film, he's got a few tendencies that really remind me of Marcus Peters. He's instinctual. He has learned to jump routes. He'll come off of coverage. And we'll see a few plays here of him doing those things. He's also susceptible to the deep ball. So another similarity there. I think that the Chiefs are going to have to take a couple of different shots, and honestly with a couple different people. If they get singled up with Watkins or Hill, this is going to be a big, big advantage for the Chiefs, and I look for them to try to exploit that. On the defensive side, the Chiefs are going to have a pretty good outing for what's been coming on for them too, and that's the pass rush. In D Ford, leading the league in pressures at this point, and Breeland speaks improving his game. They're facing a pair of tackles that are both lower than the 50th ranking according to PFF. A lot of pressures given up. Not a whole lot of prowess there. A little bit different from their interior guys. We'll talk about them in a minute, but the tackles in particular are vulnerable. Look for passing downs for them to move guys around. I'd like to see them stack Speaks and Ford on the same side a little bit. Move Chris Jones out to the edge some, because I think that's a way that they can vary their looks and get a lot of pressure on those two guys in particular. Their tight ends can't really help out a whole lot, maybe a little bit of a chip, but they're not blockers to say. The athlete Njoku is probably their best blocker at this point in terms of getting things done. But Hubbard in particular, he's the second most sacks in the NFL. And I think you really have to concentrate on him. So that's D Ford's speed against a fairly sizable right tackle that isn't performing very well. That's a recipe for good things for D Ford and this defense. So we will look to see that. The other thing is that Baker Mayfield has a tendency, especially when pressured, he's good on the scramble, but if he's pressured within the pocket, he has a tendency to underthrow some passes and get them picked. So that combination is going to give a couple of opportunities, I think, for the outside corners to have a shot. Now, the Chiefs' defense, especially with Anthony Hitchens still hurting, although he did practice some this week, very, very lightly. Justin Houston did as well. So, number 3, they have to guard against the running game, and that's going to be a little bit tough with Hitchens hurt. We'll see whether Niemann gets a lot of run and what they do with Dorian O'Daniel, because the inside trio on the Cleveland offensive line is very good and can get a lot of things done blocking on the inside. And you have Georgia alum Nick Chubb, who I think was my favorite running back coming out of the draft last season. I had him ranked number 1 above his cohort, Sony Michel, who's we've seen up in New England. Chubb's getting a lot done between the tackles. And as we'll see from some of his runs, particularly going to the right over the right guard, maybe sometimes a little off the right tackle, but a lot of that B gap or where the guard was, I think is a place that they have to be very, very particularly aware of that. So hopefully they see Reggie Ragland shift over there, play behind a lot of Allen Bailey. I expect him to be on the field quite a bit. And if he does get subbed in for, I expect it to be Noddy and Williams to try and give them a beefier look in between the tackles. I'd love to see them try to cover up all 3 and run some more of their base defense with the guard, center, guard all covered. I think that's a recipe that will slow down what is the strength of the Cleveland offense in Nick Chubb. So if they can do that, I think that sends them back to trying to run some lateral type running plays that I think the Chiefs are now in better shape to corral between Niemann and O'Daniel having to play more. They're both a little speedier side to side, although Reggie Ragland's been coming on as well. And if you missed some of his stuff in the film room from the last video, go back and check that out, because I think you'll see that he's making some progress as well. Point 4, Kareem Hunt should be featured in this game. I think they're going to get out themselves to a good lead. Probably through the pass game, but either way, I think the Chiefs are going to be playing ahead again at the end of the first quarter, much like they've done through most of the regular season. And I think that bodes well for using Kareem Hunt and a little bit of Spencer Ware in there too. I think he gets back on the field to kind of run and eat up some time and take advantage of this team in that way. They've seen over the last few weeks that backs like Melvin Gordon and John Connor can hit the edges on this defense and find a lot of success. I like the Chiefs' pin and pull game. I want to get those guards out in space. I think that's something that can pay off for this team. But you wouldn't actually expect it because of the prowess of the player. But I think one of the keys to this running game in particular is running at Myles Garrett. He has given up a lot of outside runs where he either over pursues and gets too far upfield and has backs cut inside of him, or he's just not standing up to double teams as well as you would expect from a player of his prowess. So there's a couple of examples that just show this is really the direction in terms of giving up yardage that this defense has been most susceptible to. So run to the left of the offensive formation, attack Garrett. Like to see them do some traps and some kickouts with those guards, and I think that can really pay off. Spring Kareem Hunt for some very large runs, and we've seen what he can do after contact. Maybe he'll hurdle somebody again, but I don't think he'll have to. That's where I think they're really, really looking to go, and I think that will pay off in terms of increasing their yardage, eating up some clock, and really putting away a team that they should beat on paper 10 times out of 10. Now, this is always one of those trap games because of their history and how all this turmoil kind of goes together in kind of lulling opponents to sleep. So the biggest question, I think, maybe a 5-point here, is can Andy Reid make sure that this team is intense and focused on making sure that they don't have a letdown. They don't take anybody for granted. Guys like Schobert, even Peppers is really athletic. They have some defenders that can do some things, and they have some guys on offense in Jarvis Landry and even Higgins that can do some damage. I don't think that it's anything too lofty because the athleticism isn't over the top. Jarvis runs some nice routes, but I think he's coverable, especially by Kendall Fuller. We'll see how that goes down, but the key for this team overall is to stay focused on getting the job done and just getting out of Cleveland with a win. I think they do, and I think it's going to be pretty clear-cut. Thank you for your time. If you like what you're seeing here, throw that thumbs up and make sure you get subscribed. Appreciate all your time. I'll be live after the game Sunday evening, regular time. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you then.